Hello, welcome back to another section of 3 More Words by Ashley Rhodes Corder. It's actually like the second to last section we will be doing of this book. Very exciting. We're getting so close to the end. You can see that's how much we've got left. But if you're just joining us for the first time, first of all, hi, welcome in. Great to have you. But I do recommend that you go back on my channel and watch the videos for her first book, which is titled 3 Little Words, because that gives you the full scope of Ashley's story from the beginning of her experience in foster care as a child, and then this goes on to tell her experience through the foster system as a parent, a guardian. And she is just, it's such a touching story. She's a master storyteller, a beautiful writer. So yeah, definitely recommend that you go check that out. But and if you're liking this, subscribe so you can catch the rest, and stay tuned next time. I'm going to announce our next read, so that's exciting. But no further ado, let's get going with this section. We're on page 247. We're in the middle of chapter 16, which was titled Blowing in the Wind. So top of page 247, there was a page break at the end of 246. So let's go. When I went home to pack, Eric said, "While you were having a family reunion, I decided to see what your brother has been up to." He handed me a printout of Luke's recent criminal record. "I know he's been in trouble a few times as a juvenile, like that knife incident on the 4th of July. It's much worse than that. He's had several felony arrests every year since he turned 18, 6 years ago," Eric read aloud, "leaving the scene of a crash involving damage, criminal mischief, domestic battery, aggravated battery, strong-arm robbery, possession of carisoprodol." What's that? Soma, a powerful muscle relaxant. Druggies mix it with Vicodin and sell it as a Las Vegas cocktail. When mixed with codeine, it's a soma coma. He scanned the sheet again. There is a burglary of an occupied structure and resisting an officer without violence. Eric whistled. Phew. Operating an unregistered motor vehicle, plus fleeing or eluding at high speed with wanton disregard. He has over a dozen felony charges and nearly 20 misdemeanors, and counting. Why isn't he locked up? He can probably afford good lawyers. The rest seemed to all be serious traffic violations, including no license to operate a motorcycle, leaving the scene of yet another accident, driving while license suspended or revoked, and last, but not least, another domestic violence that seemed to coincide with his breakup with Paige. Okay, the kid's a mess, which is why I'm offering to help. Lorraine says he has a substance abuse problem. Maybe we can get him into treatment. He can afford to pay for one of those country club places. I kissed him. Sorry to leave you with the kids. No worries. Only 2 kids seems like a vacation. We hugged goodbye far longer than usual. Gotta run, I said. I have an AA meeting to get to. I met Luke in a church parking lot. He was talking to a guy in a wife-beater shirt who had used half a tube of gel on his hair. "That's my sister," Luke said. "Your mom is the greatest," the guy said. "She's talked me off the ledge a few times." He pointed to where people crowded around. Lorraine was holding a cell phone. "Anyone able to go pick up some guys?" She handed her phone to the volunteer. "Okay, people, meeting's starting in 5. We filed into a church classroom. I took a seat toward the front and made Luke sit by me. Lorraine opened the meeting. "Good evening. My name is Lorraine, and I'm an alcoholic." I thought the whole purpose of AA was to be completely anonymous, so I was surprised that she gave her name. "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, a worldwide fellowship of men and women who help each other to stay sober." After reading some general information, she said, "If there's anyone who is here for the first meeting, please introduce yourself by your first name or made-up name only." A few people spoke. "Anyone else?" She directed her glance to Luke. Luke shifted in his seat. "Yeah, well, I'm only here because that lady is my mom." "Give a name," another woman coaxed. Oh, yeah. He coughed. My name is Luke, but I'm not an alcoholic or anything like that. I don't really belong here. I make good money and do investments in real estate. A man on the aisle reached over and touched his arm. Don't worry, son, he said. You are in the right place. I was riveted by the way Lorraine commanded the room like a presenter. She projected her voice, fielded questions smartly, tuned into each person's need, reflected back their feelings, and had that inner glow that couldn't be bottled and sold. Then it hit me. This was the genesis of my talent. What people called my charisma had come from her. Autumn was away for the weekend, so Luke took her room. I was only planning to stay the night, so I camped out on the couch and would share the guest bath with Luke down the hall. Lorraine had bought some hot dogs and hamburgers to grill outside and handed me a bag of chips to put in a bowl. Luke grabbed some from the bag and smashed them into his mouth, starving. Once the food was on the table, Lorraine sat down but did not eat. My dad, your grandfather Rhodes, passed on last week. Oh, I'm so sorry, I said. In the end, he died from booze and drugs and hard living, she said. Runs in our family. And your dad's, too. She nodded toward Luke. There's another way, a healthier way. I know, I'm not one to talk, but I'm trying, finally. But I can only do it one day at a time with the support of my family and friends. I'm doing fine on my own, Luke said. Except for all your arrests. I stared at him. People are always trying to get me in trouble, like Paige. She runs me over and calls it domestic violence on her. Addicts find it hard to admit they're at fault for anything, Lorraine said patiently. We bury our self-hatred in our drug of choice. I fell asleep on the couch while they were still going at it. As I dozed off, I thought, maybe she can get through to him. Maybe she is the only one who can. I don't give a crap that it's 4 on a Sunday morning. Tell him to call me. I've got to talk about my investments today, I heard Luke saying. His voice was coming from the bathroom. I stumbled off the couch and stood outside the open door. I know, but my cash is tied up in those damn houses, and I think Paige has the paperwork. Right, they're in her name. I did that after the accident so nobody could come after me. Yeah, I know. I'll get it fixed. He saw me and said, Gotta go. Luke, it's the middle of the night. Who are you talking to at this hour? My lawyer. I have court on the 25th, and there are some complications. He popped open the top of a prescription drug bottle and shook several into his mouth, swallowing them without water. What's that? My antibiotic. How many are you supposed to take at a time? I need an extra dose because only 17% stays in your body. I've never heard anything like that. He opened a second bottle and took one pill out. Then he looked at me defiantly and took another and downed them both. I wasn't in the mood to argue with him, so I went back to the couch. Luke sat in the chair opposite me and started playing a game on his phone that went blink, blink, ding, ding. Luke, do that in your room and close the door. I fell into the hard sleep of a parent who hadn't slept more than 3 hours in a row for what seemed like forever. The smell of breakfast was my alarm clock. Oh, this looks great, I said, and took a crisp piece of toast off a paper towel. I told Lorraine about the pills in the middle of the night. She became alarmed. I'll check on him. He's out cold and there's puke all over the toilet seat, she reported. He'll need a medical detox because of his leg. I'm going to have to head home. It's not fair to leave Eric much longer. I've got this, Ashley, she said. That night, Lorraine texted me that Angel and her husband were on their way to take Luke back. I called Luke. Think about the rehab. You need it, I pleaded. I'm a grown man and I can make my own damn decisions. Yes, and you're doing a great job so far. My tone was sarcastic. Angel has always been there for me. She does whatever I want. He started laughing. I got Dusty's phone number and I called him and told him where I was at. Dusty was his birth father who had been in prison for as long as I could remember. He's out? Some halfway place. He's going to buy me a phone. Like I need him to buy me crap. But it was fun to get his hopes up. What did Lorraine say about this? She's pissed. She doesn't want anything to do with him. My cheek began to twitch with a long-forgotten childhood tic. Eric had been right. I was wading in a pond so murky and polluted that I had better get out before I absorbed any more poison. I hung up abruptly. I called Angel. You know that my brother is taking a lot more than just some antibiotics, I said. He needs professional help. We're working on it from our end too. We've always cared deeply about him. What about this mess with Paige? Does she really control his money? Not now. We've got all his powers of attorney, and he's putting some of his property in our name. Why doesn't he just own it outright? He needs to clear up some other legal matters first. What's the court date that he has coming up all about? She coughed. That's his business. A week later, Lorraine called. Good news! All our efforts paid off. Luke checked him into one of the rehabs I recommended. Really? Our intervention was successful. Angel took him yesterday and he signed himself in. I think he's going to work the program. I hope so. 3 days after that, I wrote a check and noticed it was the 25th of the month. 2 days after that, Lorraine called. He busted out of rehab. It was all a scam to get out of court date. I'm sorry, I said to Lorraine. You gave it your best shot. One day he'll go back and it'll work. Look at me. I'm finally sober, although every day is a struggle. You've been through a lot of hardship, I said, which was the closest I had ever come to giving her a break. What AA has taught me is that no matter how far I have fallen, I know my experience can benefit others. She cleared her throat. Hey, maybe I should write a book. That's the end of chapter 16. Got chapter 17 on page 254, The White Flag of Surrender. There are no unwanted children, just unfound families. The National Adoption Center. Now our little family consisted of Ethan and Skylar, and everything hummed along as if it were meant to be. I'd be happy if Skylar never left, Eric said, skirting the forbidden words about love and adoption. Skylar had come to us with a plan to be reunited with his mother. We had to be prepared to relinquish him at any moment. Friends asked us all the time, though, whether we would keep him, as if it was our decision. They also asked the secret to adopting a baby from a child welfare agency. If you ask, I would explain, they will tell you, and rightly so, that none are available. Then I'd go on to explain how one of our friends adopted a sibling group of 3 under age 3, and another has 2 boys, one raised from 4 weeks and the other from 9 months. Each had been a foster child like Skylar, who was destined to return to his reformed parent, or, like Lance, find a home with a relative. When neither works out, the long-term foster parents then have the first opportunity to adopt. Until the moment it is decided that both biological parents cannot care for the child, they have ownership. When a child is in state custody, the parents are still in control of medical decisions and grooming, and they have the right to visit. Social service agencies are required to assist the parents with drug treatment, counseling, and parenting classes to help rehabilitate them over the course of approximately a year. A year sounds fair, but to a baby like Skylar, a year was his whole life. Except for brief visits with Tiffany, his world consisted of Eric and me, his baby brother Ethan, all his foster grandparents, aunts and uncles, and our many friends who visited and babysat. He had a second universe at his daycare center where his sunshiny smile lit up his classroom. As I cared for Ethan and Skylar, I tried to imagine each one's future. Ethan would never leave us. He'd be ours for the rest of our lives. Nevertheless, a tiny corner of my mind imagined how we would feel if removed from us, even for a few months. I could hear his every cell screaming for us, and that thought alone made me crazy. Yet I was supposed to find this fate acceptable for Skylar, who had lived with us even longer. This is how it has to be, I told myself. You knew what you signed up for, I told myself. They took Albert back, and eventually the pain receded, I told myself. But Skylar, would he ever get over it? Would being wrenched from us scar him in some profound way? I knew I would pull him from a fire or leap in the surf to rescue him, but I was powerless to fight the court process. There were 3 power players who would determine Skylar's fate. Bennett, his guardian ad litem, Gwen, his case manager, and Maya, our placement agency director. Also on the chessboard was Skylar, who could be moved around by any of those 3. Eric and I were bystanders, entrusted to his day-to-day welfare but not in control of his destiny. His father, charged with attempted murder, was in jail and barred from the game. The Queen, who had retained a lot of power but not all of it, was his mother, Tiffany. When Tiffany went to court, a public attorney represented her. In a typical deal with the state, she agreed to work on the tasks in a case plan, and if she successfully completed them, her children would be returned to her. Nobody could prove that Tiffany, who wasn't home when the boys were injured, had done anything to put them at risk other than selecting the wrong boyfriend. Under similar circumstances, some mothers would have been able to keep their children, but Skylar's and Denver's injuries were so severe that every precaution was taken. "You don't have to worry about Tiffany," Gwen assured us. "She's going to be reunited with her boys." On the surface, Tiffany had a lot going for her. She was barely into her 20s, attractive and well-spoken. "Gwen's really pushing for reunification," I said to Eric. "She has yet to understand the serious issues beyond that pretty face." During a visit with Denver, Tiffany told us that she'd been sexually abused as a child. She had listed several men as possible fathers for the 2 boys. Denver's father had been a wild card. Skylar's dad was the one who'd tried to kill him. Would her next boyfriend also be unstable? Gwen was supposed to be an advocate for the whole family, not just the parent. Eric and I initially agreed that she was one of the best case managers we had met and was one of the few who had an MSW. At first, she was willing to do the grunt work of transporting and supervising visits. Her offices in Pasco County were an hour and a half from our home in St. Petersburg. Other Pasco workers, like Albert's, asked local workers to do their monthly visits, but Gwen personally transported Skylar and Denver for visits to see their mother. For a change, here was someone hands-on and positive. While Gwen didn't see us as part of the reunification team, we were willing to do whatever it took to help this young mother get her children back. We believed this was one parent who had the potential to progress. However, when we pointed out something odd about Tiffany's behavior with one of her children, Gwen dismissed it as inconsequential. She also said our fears about Tiffany's new boyfriend were theoretical and unfounded. Soon, Gwen delayed responding to our calls and emails, and when we did speak, she was very curt. Since there was a shortage of volunteers, a guardian ad litem supervisor was in charge of the case until a seasoned guardian, Bennett, was appointed eventually. "I know Gwen is sympathetic to Tiffany," Bennett said, "but I've seen many mothers side with their boyfriends over the child. And Tiffany can't handle both kids at visitation." "We worry that Gwen has almost done too much for Tiffany," Eric said. "At this stage, Tiffany should be able to transport herself and deal with her kids on her own. She always asks for help during diaper changes and feedings. I don't see her learning to be independent." "No question about it," Bennett replied. "Not to mention, we just confirmed she's pregnant again, and has been for months. She's been lying about it in court." Fortunately, Bennett was only concerned with the best interests of the child. In Denver's case, he was to be reunited with at least one parent as quickly as possible, and that had been accomplished as soon as paternity was proven. "Tiffany talks a good game," he said, "but left to her own devices, she starts falling apart." As time went on, staffings and court hearings became more divisive. When a supervisor asked what she was learning in her parenting classes, Tiffany regurgitated memorized lines like, "I believe in positive parenting," and "redirection and praising work better than punishment," and "a timeout can only last 2 minutes for a 2-year-old. Though she had completed her parenting classes, to the professional observers at the visitation center, it became clear that she wasn't applying the information. She was also overheard coaching another woman on how to tell the professionals what they want to hear. "We're trying to help her get her son back," I told Bennett, "but think she's still making poor choices that could put both Skylar and the new baby in danger." "Thanks for the information," Bennett said. "Who else knows about this?" "We told Gwen about our concerns, but it wouldn't hurt for you to pass them along as well," Eric said. "I had planned to," Bennett said. "Tiffany is very two-faced and can be manipulative. She has already tried to play me against Gwen, so I've been communicating with Gwen more often." Eric and I shot each other worried looks, because we weren't sure where he stood in terms of us. We knew Bennett was squarely for the child's best interest, but how did he interpret Skylar's needs? Bennett took a long breath before saying, "We've all seen instances where Tiffany twists people's words. I recommend that you don't have any direct contact with her at this stage. She already thinks you're trying to keep Skylar from her, so there is no reason to give her ammunition against you." After that meeting, we both had hearts so heavy we couldn't comfort each other. Eric and I had raised Skylar, expecting that he would never be ours. Loving Skylar was risky. It was like falling for a married man. Even though you know that statistically the relationship is doomed, you kid yourself into believing that you are exceptional enough to beat the odds. Loving Ethan without restraint also made it easy to realize that I had loved Skylar long before I admitted it. "Maybe we should figure out what to do if Tiffany doesn't regain custody," Eric said the next day. "Nobody sees the same red flags we do. Skylar's case is going just the way Albert's did. In fact, Albert's father completed fewer of his case plan tasks than Tiffany has. Still, I want to ask our families how they would feel if we actively tried to adopt Skylar." "Eric, why get their hopes up? I need to know how they feel just in case." "Okay, you ask your parents and I'll ask mine." Eric's parents, who lived close by and did the most babysitting, wholeheartedly supported us. Phil said, "He's our grandchild, as long as he's here, and he'll be in our hearts forever." Gay, who understood the legal situation best, was pragmatic. "The mom is technically complying with the tasks. She did all her parenting classes, but she falls apart during visits when Gwen or another worker isn't there to help her with Skylar. Legally, though, she hasn't done anything bad enough for them to terminate her rights." Gay said, "I don't want to raise your hopes, sweetie. We all love Sky, but he's probably going home." But I didn't want to hear the facts. I just wanted her support. "I know, honey." Gay was so quiet I could almost hear her thinking. "Let's assume Skylar is available for adoption. You and Eric have just started your own family. Maybe he should go to an infertile couple. To strangers? Why would they be more entitled or qualified than us?" "Okay, then I have to ask, will you be able to love him as much as you love Ethan?" "We loved Skylar first," I answered, "and we are so freaked out about letting him go back. Tiffany means well, but she really doesn't have what it takes, especially with another baby on the way." I started to cry. Gay was silent for a long time. "There's one possible way," she said. "Tiffany has to want you to be Skylar's parents." She thought for a minute. "Tiffany lost Denver to his father and hasn't lived with Sky for more than a year. She admitted early on that she isn't very bonded to him, but she may be very motivated to keep a new baby out of the system." "What are you getting at?" "Everything in life is about relationships. I've worked on at least 10 open adoptions where the parents surrendered voluntarily because they had some kind of contact. However, for this to work, you have to build trust with the mother. The guardian doesn't want us to interact with Tiffany because she's so deceitful. He's wrong." Gay, who was very blunt, said, "You used to talk with her a lot, so I would start that again. You need to show her that you're different from the workers and guardian, and that you're not in the enemy camp. Worst case, she'll have more access to information about Skylar and feel more connected to her child, which will help if they reunify. In the best case, she'll realize the stability you can offer Skylar. Eric and I discussed the problem while supervising Ethan in a bouncy chair. If we tell the professionals that we are interested in adoption, they'll say we're undermining the reunification goal, Eric said. Ethan started winding up for a cry, so I handed him a rattle that made a cute noise when he shook it. I can't see any situation where it's helpful for Tiffany to hate us, I added. Being friendly would also help if we had to work with her for a transition. I was nervous as I dialed her phone number. Tiffany picked up the phone after a few rings. Who is this? Hey, Tiffany, this is Ashley, Skylar's foster mom. Oh, hi, she said a bit hesitantly. I know the last staffing was a little intense, and we wanted to reach out and discuss something with you. I really appreciate you calling. I was beginning to think the visitation center was right. What do you mean? I said, turning the question. You know that lady at the front desk? Well, she said I'd better watch out because you could cause a lot of trouble for me. She said you're a real bitch. I reeled back and went to find Eric, who was watering the garden. I put the phone on speaker. I'm not sure what you've heard from other workers or staff, but we wanted to be in direct contact with you ourselves to avoid any misunderstandings. I took a deep breath. The first day we met, we told you that we weren't fostering to adopt. We have helped many children return home. I thought I was doing all right, but the people at the place where I'm doing my parenting classes said they will not be recommending reunification. Why? They said I'm not internalizing the lessons, whatever that means. Albert's father had hardly internalized any lessons either. Maybe they needed to see more progress in a case where a child had almost lost his life. Or maybe this was all because Bennett had made someone pay close attention. Can I ask you something? Tiffany said with a choked voice. Sure. If they won't give Skylar back to me, would you want to adopt him? I felt like a rubber band had snapped in my mind. This was it. Or maybe not. While I was trying to overthink how to respond, Eric jumped in. We absolutely would, if that were an option, he said softly and simply. I got my voice back and added, He's been with us over a year. We're the only family he knows, except his visits with you, of course. I appreciate your honesty, Tiffany said. Someone told me that if I stay in Florida, they could take my new baby. It's a girl. She started crying. I don't know what to do. If I go, at least I'll have my baby and Lamar. That's her daddy. He's got a job out of state and wants us to come live with him. But I'm also thinking that Lamar's mom could take Skylar while I'm gone. Eric was gesturing wildly and tried to decode. Eric was gesturing wildly, and I tried to decode his message. Let's get together and talk about it, I said. Eric nodded. We can have lunch somewhere. Please bring Skylar. I glanced at Eric. He nodded. Okay. Now we were floating free from the foster care bureaucracy, which was as scary as it was empowering. Tiffany picked a fast food restaurant and we didn't complain. At least they had high chairs. Tiffany already had a table. She introduced us to Lamar's mother, Marla, who we hadn't expected to be there. Eric positioned Skylar's high chair next to Tiffany, and we took the other side of the table with Ethan's high chair. For the first time, Tiffany and I talked freely. She was amazed to find out that I was only 4 years older than she was. You've already gone to college, she said. That's what I'm going to do next. A lot of young parents go part-time, I said, thinking how easily I could have been in her shoes. I discussed it with Marla, and I think it's a good idea for you to adopt Skylar. But when I talked to Gwen, she said that I would have no control over what family he went to if I signed over my rights. I took Tiffany to see a different lawyer. Marla's voice crackled like a 2-pack-a-day smoker. Eric reached for my hand under the table and squeezed it. So, what do they say? I managed without sounding too alarmed. I still have the right to work with a private adoption agency, Tiffany said. Really? I felt bile rising in my throat. There were thousands of families who would pay big bucks for this poster child toddler. Don't worry, Tiffany said. We still want you to be his parents, don't we, Marla? Yep, he should stay with the folks who's been caring for him. Marla fiddled with a plastic lighter. How does the private agency work? Eric asked. I signed Skylar over to their agency, and then you would adopt him through them. I get to set the terms of an open adoption, and their people write out the papers that say I can see him and all that. I know other people who have done adoptions, and the family never let them see their kids again. Private agencies usually charge a fee, Eric said. There's no charge to anyone if you surrender to the state, I chimed in. Plus, they cover the legal fees of the adoption. If he is adopted privately and not as a foster child, he would lose his health insurance and Florida college tuition waiver. Tiffany's eyes widened. I didn't think about that. Marla cleared her throat. Yeah, but that caseworker still said the state can place him with anyone they want, not the family Tiffany picks. Eric sighed. Yes, that's true, theoretically, but that isn't what happens. Since Skylar's been in our home for well over a year, they will first ask us if we want him. He won't go anywhere else. Tiffany was now weeping. Tiffany, I began, I know this is terribly hard, and I don't want to put any additional pressure on you, but if Skylar stays with us, you will always be in his life. I'm adopted, and I still see my biological family. We believe in open adoption, and would be happy to stay in touch as long as it's safe for Skylar. I believe you, Ashley. She swallowed hard. Won't his dad have to agree too? The idea that this monster had any power over Skylar was so unsettling, I didn't know what to say. Anything and everything could still go wrong. A week after Easter, Eric stayed home through Ethan's nap, and I caught up on some shopping. I stopped by a display of half-off Easter baskets in the clearance aisle and admired two matching but slightly different wooden baskets. One was decorated with trains, the other with planes. Perfect for Ethan and Skylar, who were 8 months apart and would both be old enough to enjoy them next year. I wanted to buy the baskets, but would I be jinxing the adoption? What if the father refused to sign? What if Tiffany changed her mind? If Tiffany insisted on some relative or non-relative who could pass a home study, the twin baskets would be a horrible reminder of our lost son. But what if Skylar was with us and I only had one basket? They were two for the price of one. I could donate the extra if it came to that. My thrifty side told me to take the chance. During the last court hearing, Skylar's father was taken aside by his lawyer, who convinced him that it would be in his best interest not to drag the dependency case out further, because it could have negative implications for his pending criminal trial. He agreed to sign. None of the officials knew that Tiffany was planning to leave the state when the termination of rights hearing was over. We would keep our promises for an open adoption, but we would not be sorry if she became distracted with her new baby, or distance made visits less frequent. That's the end of chapter 17. All right, we'll get into a little bit of chapter 18. Page 267, 3 more words. The best is yet to come. William Shakespeare. For once, everyone is happy to be in court. Children carrying balloons run through the halls. Judges hand out teddy bears. November is National Adoption Month. Thousands of adoptions are finalized in a few short weeks. It's always a busy time for me as I crisscross the country giving speeches, which are often booked a year in advance at child welfare events. The call came from a director at the Pinellas County Guardian Ad Litem office. Hi, Ashley, she said. Sorry to contact you so late, but we were hoping you would be available to speak at the Adoption Day in Pasco. Both Eric and I had worked as guardians with her. Nice to hear from you, I said, but she interrupted me. The event is on Thursday, November 8th this year. I know, I said, laughing to myself. Is it possible you'll be available? Well, I said, I'll be very busy, although I think I could squeeze it in. This time I chuckled aloud. Eric and I are adopting our son that same day in that court. I can't believe it, she said, and we happily confirmed that I would speak as part of the ceremonies. 5 months passed between Tiffany surrendering Skylar and his adoption. Despite her fears, nobody snatched him from our home to place him with another family waiting to adopt. If Tiffany had been assured he would have remained with us, her stress would have been minimized. Yet, there are no guarantees. I'd heard of instances where an adoption was canceled at the last minute because one of the prospective parents was arrested, so adoption agencies generally do a final background check. Even families that seem squeaky clean on the surface have had unpleasant secrets come to light at the last moment. In the meantime, we were still a therapeutic foster care family. Maya called one morning. I really need a huge favor, she said. We have 2 brothers, ages 18 months, and 4 who need a placement until they can find a pre-adoptive home. What's their behavior profile? I asked. With Skylar and Ethan, we couldn't have a hitter, a biter, or a sexually abused child who acted out on others. I can assure you, they are lovely boys, but nobody in regular foster care will take them. I don't understand. They're African American. What? Do you mean to tell me that they rejected these kids because of their skin color? Nobody is forced to take any child for any reason, and apparently they don't have an available family with an open bed and the right profile, Maya said without confirming my comment. Does this mean you'll accept them? Of course, I said, shocked that such prejudice still existed. Their caseworker, Lindsay, delivered Micah and Zachariah in less than 2 hours. I am so grateful, she said effusively. We've been trying to place them for a week. I sized up the 2 handsome boys for clothing size. We had plenty to fit little Zachariah, but Micah would need a new wardrobe. I made them a welcome lunch and added a lesson in please and thank you. They caught on quickly. Then I called Gay, who was coming to Eric's father's birthday party the next day. I gave her the children's sizes, and she went to the nearby children's upscale consignment store, where she got an additional discount for foster children to outfit Micah. At the party, Micah played doctor, asking people to open their mouths. He used a belt as a pretend blood pressure cuff and acted very solemn as he went around the room checking everyone. He's had a lot of medical care, I said. I think he's working out some trauma. Shanice, that's their mom, has been homeless for years, I told Eric. She has mental health issues and sometimes left the children alone for days in the shelters. Anything could have happened to them in that environment. Gay went online and ordered a child's doctor kit. When Micah came home from school 3 days later, the package was there. We let him unwrap it. I expected he'd jump up and down with excitement. Instead, his face turned serious. Let's begin, he said, turning to Eric. He gave Eric a full exam, checking his ears, his nose, and his throat. He took his blood pressure with a realistic cuff and listened to his heart with a stethoscope, which had a small amplifier. When he was finished, he came over to Eric and took his hand. I see what the problem is, he said with a concerned tone. What? Eric asked, pretending to be alarmed. You have chicken in your ears. Eric couldn't suppress a smile. Oh no, what do I do? I'll take them out for you. Zachariah was close in age to Skylar, but he had some developmental delays. We were grateful that Skylar had arrived when he was so young. In his daycare class, he was the most advanced in physical development and speech. Zachariah joined my Cuddle Bunny Club, and I tried to give him plenty of lap time because he craved close contact. Micah enjoyed playing independently with cars and building toys. If I took the sofa, I would have one boy on each side. Interestingly, the child who was the most independent was Ethan. I wasn't sure whether it was due to his personality or because somehow he knew there had never been the slightest possibility of going anywhere else. "Mrs. Smith," the caller said, "don't forget that picture day is tomorrow for Micah and Zachariah." "Right, thanks. I'll be sure to pack an extra outfit." It had been the most ordinary of calls, yet I reacted with a racing pulse. How I had loved picture day at school. I always wore my best dress, brushed my hair, and even cleaned under my fingernails. When I was adopted, we found few school pictures in my files, but I had never seen them before. Often I had already changed schools when photos came back, or I had started the school after picture day had taken place. Of course, we ordered each a photo package for their albums, as well as a plaque for Micah's preschool graduation picture on it. Even if they weren't with us when these came back, we would be sure the boys got them. After a few months, we asked Lindsay about their case. "Any progress on finding them an adoptive family?" "There are a few issues," Lindsay said. "Both fathers have agreed to surrender. However, their mom said she just can't bring herself to sign the documents." "Now what?" "We'll have to file for a termination hearing." "How long are we talking about?" 6 months, maybe a year. "By then these boys will consider us their family. What about a pre-adoptive family?" I glanced around our living room, which looked like we'd left a window open during a tornado of toys and blocks. "There aren't many who will accept the risk knowing the mom hasn't surrendered yet. There's no way these children are being reunified, right?" I had heard the mom had added more prostitution charges to her long record. "Of course not. They'll be so much easier to place while they're still young. Zachariah's in diapers, and Micah's developing an amazing vocabulary. He's very interested in science and medicine." I woke Eric up in the middle of the night. "What? Who?" he asked, figuring it was his turn with one of the kids. "I just need to talk about the Oliver boys." He groaned and sat up next to me. "Let's look at it from their mother's point of view. She's homeless, mentally ill, and a prostitute, but she still has a last vestige of dignity. She doesn't want to give away her children to people she doesn't know. Remember, Tiffany felt the same way." "You're right." Eric held his hand up like a traffic cop. "Wait, maybe we should contact that private agency Tiffany told us about." "They do work much faster. The state could drag the case out for a year or more. Shanice could surrender her rights to their agency and may feel empowered by getting to choose their new parents. But the agency charges a fee. It wouldn't cost the mother anything, and the families she would be choosing from would already be aware of the costs. Neither of us could see a downside. I phoned the agency the next day. "Based on the information you were able to provide," the agency had said, "we could help this mom. The last time we took a foster care case, we found the child an adoptive home in 2 weeks." "That fast?" I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "We work nationally," she said. "I want to make a few calls first, and then I'll get in touch with our caseworker." Shanice was thrilled with the idea of picking her children's new family. Their caseworker, Lindsay, was also excited. She was working another case where a little girl had been in her pre-adoptive home for 2 years, and there were still technicalities holding up the final adoption. These young boys needed a forever home as soon as possible. The adoption agency sent a cab to pick up Shanice at her shelter, and she spent day after day pouring through the albums that families make to introduce themselves to birth mothers. The process was slowed by the fact that Shanice kept disappearing. Micah and Zachariah were eventually adopted by a biracial couple in Oregon. Though there were some unforeseen delays, the state could never have offered these children more efficient permanency. I like to imagine Micah walking along the shore, showing shells to his adoptive father, a science teacher, who might help Micah work on the cure for chickens in the ear. We adopted 20-month-old Skylar the day before Ethan's first birthday. All the Smiths and the Corters were there, as well as many of the people we had worked with as guardians and foster parents for several years. I am also on the board of the Heart Gallery, a group that uses photography to promote children waiting to be adopted, and many children who had found families from their portraits were also being adopted. After my speech, we filed into the judge's chambers for Skylar's proceedings. I like to ask children if they want to be adopted, the judge said. My stomach flipped as I recalled this very moment 15 years earlier, when I had spoken my ambivalent 3 little words so churlishly. I glanced at my parents apologetically, but they were busy grinning at Skylar, who was waving his hands. Then he gave the judge a huge smile. The judge grinned back. I'll take that as a yes. Everyone applauded. It was done. It had come full circle. I was now the adoptive mother. Outside the courtroom, our local television station interviewed me. What do you think of these events? The reporter asked. We all know the tragic cycle of abuse, where abused children grow up to become abusive parents. I like to think we've changed to the cycle of adoption. After the celebration at the courthouse, we went to a waterfront resort for a festive lunch and took family photos around their gardens. We ended the day with the family back at our house for a barbecue. The following weekend, we had a 1+1 party to celebrate Ethan's first birthday and the new addition to our family. We rented a space at a children's museum in St. Petersburg, which was the perfect place for our friends with children. I loved hearing the squealing sounds of excited children and the murmurings of parents scurrying after them. Skylar discovered the tube slide and giggled all the way down. Then he wanted to climb back up the way he came. Eric had to carry him off and put him back on the ladder. As I watched, I felt infused with a floating lightness, as if helium was filling my veins and I was looking down on the father of my children, swinging and lifting and laughing. He was happy. Skylar was happy. Ethan, who was tucked into his grandfather Phil's arms, was smiling too. Gay was at my side, and the Smith family was at the bottom of the slides, cheering Skylar on. I guess so. That young girl who said those words at her own adoption because she had felt her ties to other people would always be tenuous and ephemeral, didn't exist any longer. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored surface of a nearby exhibit. Although Ethan had rumpled my hair and sticky fingers had mauled my dress, I saw a lucky and contented woman. And that's where we will stop for this section on page 275 in the middle of chapter 18. Hope you enjoyed this. Oh, so heartwarming. Skylar's been adopted. They're his forever home. So yeah, we will be finishing this book next time, 3 more words. So catch me next time to finish it and also hear what our next read is going to be. All right, hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Bye.